Hi, I'm Jessica with Ellie and Mac, and today Stella is going to be showing you the new bag that we're going to be making in this video. So this is a really fun phone sling bag, and the great part about it is this front pocket where you can just slip your phone in and out, really easily accessible at any time. But beyond that, it also has a regular pocket where you can store all your things. So I have, wallet and keys and all the things, and there's still room. The inside does use binding, or you can use FOE, and I'll show you that later. And then there's two ways to wear it. I was going to show you that. So this is the front way. Now there are two D-rings. So whether you like to wear it over your right shoulder or your left shoulder, you can do either way. And whether you like to wear it on your front or you like to wear it on your back, you can also do it that way. Your phone will be protected inside the flap. This is a different shape flap. Your bag, if you make it with me, is going to look like this flap. So let's get started. This is, I would say, a very confident beginner or intermediate bag pattern, just because it does have the gusset and the zippers and everything, but the instructions are very detailed, and of course I'm going to walk you through every step. So what we need to do first to get this bag sewn up, of course, is to cut all the pieces out. I have all my pieces cut, so let's head over and we'll chat about that. So here are all my pieces that I've cut out for the bag. Of course, all of these pieces can be downloaded in the actual pattern, which you can find in the description below. So you're going to have a medium to heavyweight main fabric. I'm using vinyl, and you're going to need to be interfacing each part. If you have a snap or a rivet, you need to put an extra piece of interfacing in that spot. So this is the flap, and it has that for the magnetic snap. If you're using a light to medium weight fabric, which you should for the lining, you also need to be interfacing these parts. This is the slip pocket, and I wanted to mention that you can either interface this whole pocket or just half of it, because we're going to fold that and there will be one layer of interfacing in that pocket. For the rest of them, you need to be interfacing the whole thing. You can choose, if your fabric is very lightweight, that you want to take the interfacing all the way out to the edges for your lining, or if you want to just keep it out of the seam allowance and cut it on the dashed lines of the pattern. The other thing you'll need to make your bag, of course, is the zippers and the hardware. And I find this to be probably the hardest part of bag making, is just picking the hardware and making sure it matches. So I'm kind of making a bold choice with this one. I recommend, first of all, picking your zipper before you pick all the other pieces of metal, just because it's easier, in my opinion, to match your zipper first. So this is the top gusset, which will be laid like this along the zipper, so you can kind of get a feel for what it's going to look like on the bag. I say it's a bold choice because I've got kind of like a cool gray color and then this bright gold, but I think it might be kind of fun because we have these lining pieces and you're going to see a little bit of that pop out in the bag. So I'm going to go with it. So along with that, we need our main zipper piece, our exterior zipper, and the interior zipper, which of course all the links are in the pattern. And then the zippers, you can use 1 or 2 pulls for your main zipper, and then you need 1 pull for each of the smaller zippers. And then you need 2 1-inch D-rings, 1 1-inch tri-glide, and 1 1-inch swivel clasp or clip, however you want to call that. One last thing that I didn't mention before is that you do need the magnetic snaps for the flap in the front. So you have 2 options. If you have a rivet press, some kind of press or even a hand one, or the hammer set, there's a bunch of different options for that. You can use these type of magnetic snaps. You always need a male and a female end, and then a back part. So these use caps, and they press in between, that you've got the layer of fabric in there, and then they press down like that. The other option is if you don't have a press, you can use these type of magnetic snaps, and they have these little prongs on the back. So what you do is you cut 2 little slits in your fabric, make sure you have interfacing, and you can use a little bit of fray check. And then you stick that through the fabric and you stick this on the other side, and then these prongs can press out. Some people even just put a little duct tape on the back of this because sometimes these prongs can make their way through your fabric and cause a hole. But you can do that and then put a little bit of tape on the back before you move on. So I'm going to go ahead and show you with my rivet press, but if you needed to use these kind, they're pretty readily available anywhere you can buy hardware. We're going to start by installing the magnetic snap into this front pocket. So here's the 2 pieces of your front pocket. You're going to be doing just this one first. And we are going to install the female end into this one. Hopefully you've already marked that on the back. If you haven't, go back and mark it and make sure you have a nice piece of interfacing there. And I know mine doesn't look like a very nice marking, but I know where to I know where to put it. So I'm going to go ahead and use my rivet press to make a little hole here. Again, if you're using the prong kind, you can just lay the prong against this and mark where you need to put the prongs right centered on there. And then cut 2 little snips in your fabric and pop them on through. So let's get started with the rivet press though. So I'm going to go ahead and make that hole in the fabric right here. And then we're going to grab our female end. So that's the one that has, it kind of dips in. And that is going to be placed right here on the main side of our fabric. And on the wrong side, you're going to put whatever backing you have on it. So it will look like this so far. And then I'm going to go ahead and put it in my rivet press and press it in. And if you have the prong kind, you go ahead and, push those flat and add your tape if you'd like. Moving on with the front pocket, we now have our magnetic snap installed. And here's the bottom part of the pocket. You're going to mark the center of both of these pieces. This one at the top and this one at the bottom. And that way we can align these 2 pieces. We're going to put them right sides together, right there, matching up those center parts. And then you just need to continue to pin or clip along the edges right here. And the reason we mark that center is that it's a little difficult here at the end just because of the seam allowance and the way that this piece curves to make sure that it's centered if you just start clipping along. Because you see how there's like an overhang there, but that's because we have that 3/8 inch seam allowance. So once you have all that clipped how you like it, we're going to sew across right here. Now we want to press the seam allowance down toward the bottom of the pocket. And you can use an iron if you have fabric that you can iron, or you can use a roller. And make sure you do that from both sides. Make sure it's nice and flat all along there. And then you can top stitch 1/8 of an inch from that seam right here on the bottom part of the pocket. I'm using a Teflon foot. If you're using vinyl, I recommend also using a Teflon foot or putting a little bit of tape on the bottom of your foot. And then one other tip is if you have a foot like this that does not have markings, you can actually mark where you want on your foot for this to go, and it will rub off because it's not going to stay on there on this sort of plastic or metal. So even just use a regular pen for it. So I have that marked, and elongate your stitch. You want a 3 to 3.5 stitch length when you top stitch on this bag. Next, we're going to take our front pocket lining and put it right sides together with the main assembled front pocket. And we're going to pin our clip right here at the top and then just sew across the top. Don't forget to put your stitch length back to about 2.5 in between sewing and top stitching. Trim your seam allowance down to about 1/4 inch. I'm using pinking shears, but you can just use regular shears too. Either way is just great. And then we're going to fold it out so that it's wrong sides together and press or roll the top seam right here really nicely. I'm going to go over and use my iron on this back part right here, and then I'll roll it from the front. And then we're going to top stitch across with the 3 to 3.5 millimeter stitch length, just how we did right here, but along the top after we get it really nicely pressed from both sides. Now we're going to baste these two pieces together. So I'm going to go ahead and add some clips to the outside. You can use pins if you'd like. There's something important about when you baste this, and what you want to do is start on one side, come down around to the middle right here, and you can back stitch, but you're basting so it doesn't matter. And then start again here and come down and around to the bottom. And the reason for that is that we don't want this nice color blocked area right here, or style seam, to be uneven. And if we go all the way around like this, what tends to happen is that this one will get pushed down on this side and this one will get pushed up, and it'll look wonky. It'll look like that. So just stitch down and stitch down. Now that you have that basted, you're going to grab your front main panel and we're going to place it and align it along the bottom and sides. And you can pin or clip this into place. And then we're going to baste it onto this the same method that we just basted the other two parts together. We're going to start on one side, come around to the middle, start on the other side, come around to the middle. And again, it's because we don't want the top or the sides of this to get wonky on that main panel. And you can, even if you're kind of concerned about it not being even, you can fold these together and make sure that where you're lining that front pocket is the same spot on both sides. You can do that first and then pin or clip around the rest of it. Here's my flap lining. If you haven't already, make sure that you interface the flap and you add an extra piece of interfacing where the magnetic snap will go. And then we're going to install the snap here. But before you do want to double check that this is going to align with what you just sewed and the magnetic snap that you already put in. So let's double check that. So how we can check for that is, of course, this snap has already been installed and we have the placement for that one. So if we line this at the top, and you can double check that you're centered here too by folding that top flat piece and aligning it with the center line marking on your main piece. So I have that centered, and I double checked that the sides also look even, the same amount on both sides. That will help you kind of visualize it. And then you can look right here and make sure that your snap is in the correct spot. And it looks like it is in like the exact correct spot. I'm going to pull this down just a tiny bit to make sure that it aligns well, even when our pocket is full. So I'm going to put like sort of a center line marking there, and then we'll go install it. So your magnetic snap should look like this on the flap lining. Next, we're going to take our main flap and the flap lining and place them right sides together. And then you can pin or clip along the sides and bottom. And then sew from the top here around and back to the top. And just do your best to sew along these curves right at that 3/8 inch seam allowance, because this will be very visible on the bag. It's the front of the bag with this flap. Okay, how'd you do on yours? I did really good around here, and I've got a slight little jag right there. So I'm gonna pull that and just redo that little corner real fast. Okay, I'm happier with that. So the next step is we're going to trim all around this flap. I'm going to use pinking shears. If you don't use pinking shears, you will need to do like some little snips in little V's every so often around these corners, probably every 1/2 inch or so. But if you have pinking shears, you can kind of get right up close to your stitches without snipping through them, so that these curves come out really nicely. Okay, now go ahead and turn that right side out. You can stick your fingers in there, and then you can also get like a little tool, like a chopstick or something blunt, if you need to push those corners out a little better. My corners actually look pretty good with this vinyl, but it really depends on your fabric. Once you have that all turned out really nicely, you're going to press it from whatever side you can. So on mine, I'm going to press it with the iron, and I'm going to roll it on this side because I'm using vinyl. And you want these curves to just be really nicely pressed as such. And then we're going to optionally top stitch around these curves really carefully, because this is the front of your bag. And if you do this, make sure you use a 3 to 3.5 length stitch for it. And we'll come back to the next step after I do that. Okay, once you've completed your flap, you're going to baste it to the main piece that has that pocket on it. So you can first find the center of your flap by folding it in half like this, and you can put a pin or clip, or you can also snip it to mark it. And then you should already have your main panel marked, but if you don't, you can go ahead and fold that the same way and make sure you know where the center of that bag is. And if you'd like to make a little snip there, you can. And then you'll know where the center is. Don't snip too deep because you don't want it to go past that seam allowance. But that way you can line up your middles, your centers of both of these. And your snaps should align. And then pin or clip on the sides here as well. Just like that. And then we're going to go ahead and baste this top part on. Okay, once you have that basted on, we're going to set this piece aside for a little while. And we'll be working with our exterior back panel, which you should already have a welt marking on, and also the exterior pocket linings, which you should also have a welt marking on one of them. If you don't, go mark that and come back. And then these lining pieces, they can be interfaced, or you can just interface where the welt pocket is, which is what I've done here. So take your main exterior, the back here, and we're going to flip it to the right side. If you have a fabric that you can mark well on the right side, you can transfer that welt pocket marking to this right side. But if you don't, you're using vinyl like I am, then you can do it a little bit differently. So here's our lining. We're going to take the right side of this fabric, and I know it's very hard to tell, but you can tell that this is the wrong side because my interfacing is on there. But we're going to take the right side and we're going to line it where that pocket is. Now, I know we can't see it, but there's a simple way to fix this. We're going to take a pin and take it through one of the corners right here. And that's going to come up through the fabric. And then we're going to take that same corner and align it. Stick the pin through it. And now we know that's exactly where it should be. And then you can just do that for all 4 corners. Now, as you can see, it's difficult to see the welt pocket from this side. So if that's the case for you, you can go ahead and redraw it. If you've already drawn it on top of your interfacing, you're awesome and you can skip to the next step. I'm going to hurry and draw this on, and then I'll show you what to do next. Okay, I have that drawn on. So you should have these 2 pieces right sides together as such. And I like to stitch from this side, but I suppose you could stitch from either side. And you're going to do a parallel line. So you're going to start right here at this pin and sew to that pin, and start at the exact same spot here and sew to that pin. Make sure you don't go further on one side than the other. Stop right at the same spot and back stitch, and then I'll show you the next step. So you should have those 2 parallel lines. Make sure you're not stitching these like short ends, just the long ones. And then we're going to go cut through the fabric. On the pattern piece, there was a marking down the center of both the welt boxes. It was right down the center like this, and then there are diagonal lines that come out on each side. I didn't draw those in, but you can either draw them in or you can visualize, and all you're going to do is cut down the center through both layers of fabric. You can use scissors or you can use a rotary cutter for this part. I like to use a rotary cutter for the center line. Just don't go all the way to the end. And then I like to use scissors to cut into the corners. So what we're going to do is snip a diagonal line on both sides out to the stitching line. You're not going to go beyond the stitching line or through the stitching line. You want it right up to the stitching line, but not through it. We're going to do that for all 4 corners. Just like that. Next, we're going to press each of these sides to the wrong side before we flip it through. Now, if you're using vinyl like me, you can be very careful and you can press along here. If this is too scary, go ahead and grab your roller, or you can finger press. If you have a roller, you can just go ahead and do like that. And you want to do that on all 4 of the sides. Get them really nicely pressed like this. I actually think I'm a little scared with the iron, so I'm going to keep using my roller here. I don't want to have to recut that piece. Once you have them all pressed, we're going to put the lining fabric through the main fabric. We're just going to stuff it into that hole. Now, if you're having any issues with trying to get this piece up here, it's just like pulling really hard, you could trim one of these layers of vinyl, or if you have another thick fabric, you can trim the vinyl down just a little bit so that it's easier to get that through. But essentially, we're going to pull it through and then we're going to press it really well here from the back and roller press it also from the front so that we have a nice window opening for our zipper. Once you have that really nicely pressed and you have this window, then we can put the zipper in there. You can see that my lining is visible, but I kind of like it. It's like a nice little pop of color there. If you didn't like that, of course, you could push this a little further into the back of the seam there. So next you want to get your zipper that's meant for the exterior and add the zipper pull to it. If you need help with adding the zipper pull, you can look in the description below and we'll add a link on how to add the pull. So what you can do to make this a little easier is use some double-sided tape on your zipper so that you can put it on the zipper and then it will stick inside this box since it's difficult to pin or clip with the vinyl especially. So to use the tape, I'm just going to lay it right here on the edge of the zipper. And this tape's a little old, but I think it will still work okay. I'm just going to have to press a bit harder. And do that on both sides. This particular tape, you can just, you stick it on there and then there's 2 layers and you want to separate them out so that you get the sticky layer left on the tape, on the zipper tape, I should say. They're both a type of tape. That one's not sticking quite as well. Let's try from this side. Yeah, I'm not getting adherence. So let's try another piece because I think that piece is just not sticky enough. If you have a particular brand of double-sided tape that you love, I would love to hear what that is down in the comments so I can go get that too, because I think this stuff works okay, but you can see that it doesn't stick as well as it could. All right, there you go. So once you have that tape on, then we can go ahead and lay it inside the box. And we just want to get that put in pretty evenly. Your zipper should be bigger than the box, so you can kind of just center it up. Once you have that centered how you like, you're going to go over to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch around about 1/8 of an inch from that edge right there. This way, pivot up and around like that. Now, if you come to the corner and you're like, oh, one more stitch is going to put me out too far, but I need to go a little bit further. What you can do is just lower your stitch length. So let's say you're using a stitch length of 3 to go around. And you get right here and you're like, I just need one more stitch, but it's going to be too far. You can lower your stitch length to say 2 and get yourself right in that right spot and then pivot and turn to the next area. Hopefully that helps. So the back of your bag should look like this. The zipper should close to the top. If perchance your zipper closes to the top this way, it doesn't matter. You can have this as the top or the bottom since the bag is symmetrical. So whichever way it closes to the top, that's just the way that you want this top to actually be. In this case, it ended up on the left side, and that is the way that the pattern is written, but it's okay if it goes on the other side. The next thing we're going to do is flip it over and grab our opposite exterior pocket lining. And I know on this fabric you can't tell which is the right side, which makes it easy for me. But if you were doing this, you would want to do right sides together. So these right sides would be matching right here, right sides together. And then we're going to pin or clip just around these 2 layers of the pocket lining. We're not going to be clipping it and sewing it to here, just to the lining to the lining. Okay, and then we're gonna go sew this. And again, we're only sewing these 2 layers all the way around. Do not sew through the exterior panel, just the 2 layers of the pocket. Next, we're gonna work on the strap. So my strap is vinyl. If your strap is not vinyl and you can iron it, you can take it over to the iron and you can fold it in half, wrong sides together, and press it so it makes a nice crease right here. And then you'll know where the crease is, and you can fold just like binding. You're going to fold one side into the crease and the other side into the crease and press those really well with your iron, and fold it again and press that really well with your iron. And once you have it pressed really well, then you can move on to stitching the strap. But with vinyl, it's a little more complicated because we can't put it under the iron like that. So instead, if you're doing vinyl, come along with this real fast. This is a 4-inch strap, and I have a 2-inch ruler. So all along the strap, we're just going to make a line by marking it instead of by ironing it. So I'm going to use, this is a friction pen. You can use whatever marking tool you have. It doesn't have to be erasable as long as it doesn't go through the other side, because we're not going to see this. So you can see that line right there, and I'm going to make it all along the entire length of the strap. From here you have 2 options. If you have a pretty pliable vinyl like I do, you don't have to use tape. If you have a stiffer vinyl and it just won't stay for you, you can use the tape. That's up to you. If you want to use tape, what you're going to do is run 2 lines of it on either side of the line that the marking that you made here in the center. So you put one on this side and pull the tape, and then one right next to it here. And the reason that we're going to do that, if you prefer to use the tape, is that we're going to take each of these long edges to that center line marking. But again, we can't really press it the same way as we could with regular fabric. And then we're going to fold that so that those raw edges stay inside. And if your vinyl's going all over the place and you want to have it taped in there, you certainly can. If you don't have tape or you don't want to use tape, you can just clip it into place. I don't recommend this for fabric. If you can iron it, iron it. But we're going to go ahead and along the length of the strap, continue to clip or tape it into place. You want to make sure that those are actually like all the way touching. Like you don't want them overlapping because it'll make it thicker right there, but you do want them touching because the length of your strap, the width of your strap when you're done, I should say, needs to be that 1 inch so that your hardware fits over it. If your strap ends up too big because you didn't tuck those in all the way, your hardware will not fit over the strap and you'll have to redo it. Once you have the entire length of your strap pressed or taped or clipped or all of the above into place, you're going to run a stitch line 1/8 of an inch from first this edge that's open. So go down this edge, 1/8 of an inch, all the way along the strap to the end. And then come back and do the same thing, 1/8 of an inch from this side, all the way down. You want to start on the same side of the strap both times to prevent twisting. And I do highly recommend using a walking foot if you have one. If you don't, especially with vinyl, you want to use a Teflon foot or a roller foot or a walking foot, one of the above. And make sure your presser foot pressure is not too high if you have a heavy duty machine, because that will also cause the strap to twist. Okay, let's go sew it up. Your strap should now look like this. And so we're going to grab the top strap connectors, and it doesn't matter which side, but you're going to put one of these sides onto the strap right here. So what we want to do is on the short side of this trapezoid, we're going to extend and center the strap about 1 inch beyond the top here. And then we're going to put this piece right sides together with that one as such. Now, if you'd like, you can baste this piece on first to make sure that it's centered before you sew this one on, which is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and do that. So let's make sure that this is really nicely centered and that the strap extends 1 inch beyond the top of the short part. And then I'm going to run a basting stitch right along here. Okay, now that I have that basted on, I'm going to take my other piece, put it right sides together with the first top strap connector, line them up, and pin or clip along the top and sides of the top connector with that strap sandwiched in between. And then you're going to go ahead and stitch from here up, pivot over, and then down. On mine, you can see that I've actually made markings where the seam allowance is, because that is a difficult turn to make sure that you have it even on both sides. So if you'd like to do that, you can as well. This side is interfaced. The other one is not. You could choose to interface both sides, but with this being a heavier fabric, I only interfaced one side. So let's go over to the sewing machine and go ahead and stitch that. Now we need to trim the seam allowances down to about half, but we're not going to cut this top part right here. We're going to leave that long. So you need to come in underneath the strap and trim just a little bit, and then trim down this side, and same on the back. On that one, it's actually basted on mine, so it's fine. And then the one last thing you need to do is make sure that you cut right here at these corners, so that when we turn it, we can get those corners nice and sharp. Just like so. And then we're going to flip this right side out. So once you've got that turned out, make sure you press out your corners really nicely. And if you are using regular fabric, give this a nice press. If you're using vinyl or similar, just make sure you roll it and get it really nicely done, pushed out on both sides. And then we're going to top stitch starting here, go up, pivot, and back down like that. Okay, now to secure the strap, we have two options. One, we can put a rivet about a 1/2 inch below that stitching line here, and right in the center, put a rivet. Or we can do a little V. So you can mark this out with, you know, some chalk, or you can just eyeball it, but you're gonna go down to the center and back up like this. Make sure you back stitch on both ends if you decide to stitch it. I'm gonna go ahead and add a rivet right about here. And one other thing I wanted to mention is if you were using a webbing strap instead of this strap, you're gonna do the exact same thing. Just make sure that on the end of your webbing, you put a little bit of heat on both ends if this was webbing so that it doesn't fray. Okay, I'm going to go add the rivet, and you can add a rivet or that stitched V to reinforce your strap. Okay, I have my rivet installed. I'm super bummed that I didn't have rose gold, but you know, we're going silver because that's what the magnetic snaps were too. So unfortunately we'll have a little combination. That's okay. All right, so your next step is you're going to grab the back of your bag, and remember your zipper will open to the top. So that's your top. And you're going to lay this piece that you've just sewn right at the center of the top there, and pin or clip that into place. And after we get it sewn, it's going to look like this. Yay! So go ahead and give that a nice baste right across the top there. It should look like this. Okay, well, let's move on. Okay, so we're going to get started on the strap connectors. You should have two, but one is a main piece and one is a lining piece. And the reason for this is just because it gets too thick, too bulky on the back of the bag. If you don't want to see this pop of color in there, I guess you could do two mains, but then it's going to be pretty thick. So to do this, we're going to put the main and lining pieces of your side strap connectors right sides together and pin or clip along the sides. On my piece, you can see that I have marked the seam allowance where to turn. And the reason I did that this time was because it was a little difficult last time to know exactly where you should turn this far into the seam allowance. And if you don't match them up on both sides, you would have an uneven shape at the end. So if you want to mark where those turning points are on yours, you can also do that. But basically, we're just going to go down, pivot, and go down this part, and then pivot again here on both sides. Okay, once you have one done, go ahead and do the other one just the same way. On this one, I realized I didn't quite get in that same area, so I just went a little bit closer in. You can always fix yours as well. And then I'm going to grab pinking shears, and you can also use regular shears for this, but you want to get this trimmed down pretty well. And first you can just go along the seam allowance and cut about half off, and then we're going to go in and just trim into those turns. So right here where you pivoted, you want to just take your scissors and get real close, but not through the stitches on all four of those little corner areas. And then do the same for the other one. Okay, and then we just need to turn this right sides out. So this will be a little bit more difficult if your fabric is thicker, easier if your fabric is not as thick, but basically you're just gonna shove one side all the way through the other, and you can grab, you know, a chopstick or something to help you push that through. But what you should come up with is something like this, and then we're just going to give that a nice roll or press to get these really nice and flat, and then we'll put our D-rings on top of it. Okay, I went ahead and pressed mine, and I even smashed it with my tailor's ham to get it nice and flat. And the next thing we're going to do is top stitch, if you'd like, from here along the edge on both sides. Okay, you should have two pieces like this. If you chose to top stitch, they'll be top stitched all along. And then you can, on these little corners that pop out, you can trim those off so that it's flat. And then we're going to take our 1-inch D-rings and slide them over. So the idea is that this will go into the bag side right here, and then we want the D-ring sticking out this way. So you're going to squish it in there, and it should fit in that middle part if you had the correct seam allowance, and that's what the side will look like. So I'm going to pop some pins on here because we're going to go baste that in just a minute. So same thing on this. Okay, so the instructions, you can choose, I mean, first of all, you're going to probably want to just baste this bottom part. Baste there, and then you can choose whether you want to add a line of stitching right here below the D-ring or a rivet right there. And that will also depend on like how thick this is, but if you have a rivet, that might look pretty nice to just pop it right there, or you can just stitch across here. The reason I say to baste this first though is because if you don't, this might get more pushed one way or the other, and then you'll have like an uneven strap connector. So we'll do those 2 lines of stitching, or stitching and the rivet, and come back. Now that you have your connectors finished, we're just going to baste them on the side of the back of the bag. So on the pattern piece, there's a little marking where you can see where it is. If you didn't mark that, or you don't want to go back and mark it now or whatever, you can put them here. Basically, it turns and you just want it like right where it turns, that little triangle can stick out just a bit. The most important part here is that they're on the bottom of the bag. They don't go into your gusset, and that they're even. So I'm going to clip them on and then just double check that they are even by folding the bag and just making sure that they're in the same spot. If they're not, we'll move them and just make sure that they are even before we baste them on. And I'm comparing where the D-rings are, not necessarily where the triangles are, because if you didn't sew them perfectly, you know, I'm not perfect, then we want the D-rings to match up. So that looks good. And we'll go ahead and stitch along both of these areas, just basting these on really well. On to the slip pocket. This one's pretty simple. You should have at least one side interfaced. We're going to fold that wrong sides together. Line up all of these raw edges. And actually, I'm just going to pin the bottom for now and go iron this really nicely flat, because then we're going to top stitch right here along the top after we press that. So I'm going to top stitch with an 1/8 inch seam allowance right here. And then we'll continue to pin or clip all along those edges on the bottom and around the sides. Do you ever break clips? I swear my clips are all to an age where they're breaking like 5 a day. 5 a day! Okay, and then we're just going to baste around the edge right there. So here's one of the interior linings, the one that you did not mark with the welt pocket markings. And I'm going to lay this slip pocket that we just made, whichever way you think is more beautiful, you can put it down. And then it just lays in there And you want to align all these bottom edges and pin or crimp those into place. Oh, another one broke. And then we're going to baste that on. If you choose, you can do the same thing as we did with the outer pocket, and you can start at one side, come down to the middle, start one side, come down to the middle, just so that this stays straight. Okay, we'll set that aside and move on to the other side of the lining. This is the one with the interior welt pocket, so you should already have that marked, and the whole back interfaced, or at least that little welt area should be interfaced. Here's the two lining pieces for the pocket. You should also have the welt marking on there, and at least that part interfaced. Now on the other one, you notice that I hadn't marked the back. So if you haven't marked your back, go mark it right now, and then we'll come back. And then we're just going to match up the welt pocket markings on both the lining and the pocket lining and the bag lining. So you can do the same sort of pin trick that we used with the last one by putting it through the corner and then putting it through the corner on the other side. Okay, once you have that all pinned or clipped into place, you want to start and do a line starting right here at this pin to that pin, and then don't turn the corner. We're just doing one straight line, and then the same thing here, a parallel line from here to here. Okay, and then we're going to use the lines from the pattern. You can either mark them or just visualize them and cut a center line down the middle through both layers of fabric. So I like to use my ruler and my rotary cutter for the center part. And then we're going to cut out to the corners diagonally. Just don't cut through or past your stitching lines, just right up to it. So part of the reason that you still draw the box is so that you can see where that corner is. But of course we didn't stitch that box. And the reason we don't stitch it is so that we don't create puckers by turning that corner and then not getting this perfectly correct. Okay. And then we're going to go over and press each of these. So press here and on this side and underneath and on this side with your iron. Just press it really nicely so it gets a good crease. Okay, I've got mine all pressed. So the next thing is we're going to stuff that pocket lining through the hole. All the way out the other side. And then we're going to go back to our iron and we're going to press this really nicely so that all of these areas are flipped out around to the wrong side. And we make a nice window for our interior zipper. So I'm going to go press and I'll be back. Okay, so I pressed from the back side and from the front side. So now you can see that I have that nice little window in there. And then we're going to get our zipper and put the pull on. So I've got my pull on my zipper. If you need help with this step, be sure to check out the link in the description below where we have a video that shows you exactly how to do this. Okay, so next I'm going to use some double-sided tape. If you don't have this, you can just put this in the window without the tape and pin it really well. But if you're using the tape, all you need to do is just put like a nice little piece of tape right here on the zipper tape edge. Press it on really nicely. And do that for both sides. And then you can just, you should be able to, after you have it pressed on really nicely, lift up that top paper layer, and sometimes it's hard to get to. So whichever side's easiest, pull up that paper layer so that you have the sticky stuff still on your tape. Okay, now we're gonna lay this zipper into the window, and you can think about which way your zipper opens and closes. I believe the correct way is to open to the right, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, and then we're gonna pop this into the window, and we're gonna try to center it on that zipper. Your zipper should be bigger than the window here, and that's purposeful so that you can get the zipper pull on and everything easily. Just lay that down. If you've done a tape, then you should just be able to stick it to the zipper really nicely. And then we're just going to take it over to the machine and top stitch right here along the edge, about 1/8 of an inch from the edge, all the way around that rectangle. Okay, once you have that top stitch, we're going to flip it over, and if you need to, you can trim your zipper right here. And then we're going to lay the other interior pocket lining right sides together with the first. I know this is difficult. You can't tell which one is the right side, but this is the right side, and I'm laying that on the right side of this so that when you look into the pocket, you're going to see the right side of the fabric. And we're just going to line that up all along the other side of that pocket lining, the other pocket lining piece, and then pin or clip, and then we're going to go stitch just through the 2 layers of pocket lining all the way around. Okay, we're going to go ahead and prep both sides of the bag now. So we have our completed exterior front. We're going to match that up with the slip pocket interior and put them wrong sides together. Pin or clip those into place, and then we're going to baste them all together all the way around the outside. And then for the back, we're going to match that up with the interior with the zipper. And same thing here, we're just going to pin or clip. And then we'll baste all the way around that as well. Make sure that the back here, this stays down and these stay in. You don't want to be doing weird things with the exterior when you go around, and don't those over the strap. And so we'll get those basted into place. Okay, next we're working on the gusset. So you should have, these are the top main gusset pieces, and you should have 2 main and 2 lining all interfaced. And then your long zipper, and this should be the same, the teeth should be the same length as this. If your teeth are a little bit longer because you're concerned about getting the zipper pull on, that's okay, you can trim that later. But first what we want to do is grab one of these main pieces and lay it right sides together with one side of the zipper. And we're gonna pin or clip that into place. I prefer clips for a lot of this stuff for bags. How about you? Do you prefer clips or pins when you're working with bags? I assume it's clips, but maybe some people just hate clips. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. Okay, so it looks like I was holding that up, so it's not quite straight. There we go. Okay, And so you have two options here. What I like to do is baste this on first, but if you're like, oh, I don't need to baste, you can lay the lining on the opposite side, right sides together with the main, and sew it all at once. But I'm gonna go baste this first at a 1/4 inch seam allowance and then come back and add the lining. Okay, so we have that sewn to that just basted though, right? On the opposite side of your top main gusset piece here, we're going to add the top lining gusset on the wrong side of the zipper, but it'll be right sides together with the main. So we're sandwiching the zipper in between there. And then we're going to pin our clip all along the same way that we did with the other side. And this time I'm going to go along with a 3/8 inch seam allowance and use a zipper foot. And this part you want to be more careful with, trying to make sure that you get a really nice straight seam, because you're going to see, you know, the zipper tape there with the same amount on both sides, hopefully. Get a really nice straight seam, because you're going to see, you know, the zipper tape there with the same amount on both sides, hopefully. Now you're going to take both of the two pieces you just sewed to the zipper and pull them away from the zipper. And we are going to press and top stitch these in a little bit, but you can do that all at one time. Kind of saves you time. So I'm going to pull these back and clip them into place, because I don't want that getting in the way. So on the other side of the zipper, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to lay that top main piece right sides together on the opposite side of the zipper and clip that into place. And you want to make sure that at the end that these line up really nicely. And I'm going to go baste this again. Okay, you should have that basted on. And then on the opposite side, we're going to add the lining piece and make sure that's really nicely lined up with the first lining piece and the other top main gusset pieces on the ends. And then go sew that into place with your 3/8 inch seam allowance all along there. Awesome. Now you're just going to pull both of those layers that you just sewed away from the zipper, and hopefully you have a really nice looking gusset coming along. Okay, and our next step is that we're going to press this well from both sides, because if we only press it from the right side, this might bunch up in the lining when we were sewing it, and we don't want that. So we want to make sure both of these are pressed away from the zipper really well. You can use an iron if you're using ironable fabric. Just be careful that you don't also melt your zipper, or you can roll them, and then we'll come back and top stitch 1/8 of an inch from the zipper. If I can get you in focus. We're going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch from the zipper on both of these sides right here. We are getting close. Can you feel it? Can you feel us getting close to the ends? Okay, so here's that top gusset, and we need to add the zipper before we put on the bottom gusset. So grab your zipper pull and put it on. If you'd like to put two on, they need to face each other so that the opening is in the middle, and that way when it's around your bag, you can just open it right here in a little spot in the middle and not all the way around if you choose. If you want to just add one zipper, that's totally fine too. Okay, I'm choosing just to add one zipper this time. So I have my zipper on, And I'm going to just put that in the middle. And then if you added a little bit of more zipper tape so that you could get your zipper on, you can trim that now. Actually, let's use pinking shears. Let's use pinking shears. Mine aren't as good as theirs, huh? Okay, and then we're going to grab the main bottom gusset and we're going to lay it on top of our assembled top gusset. And the short sides, we're going to pin or clip both of them. Just make sure it's nicely centered. If your bottom gusset ends up just slightly wider than your top gusset, it's really normal. It just has to do with like your zipper width and how you sew this on, but you should just center it up on there. Just like that. And then you can choose to baste these on, or you can just grab the lining and pop it on the wrong side, which will be right sides together with the bottom gusset, and your top gusset is sandwiched in between. So you'll have these two touching and this one on the back. And then when we flip that, it'll all be the right way. So you can sew both of these short ends right now. Now we're going to trim the seam allowances down just a little bit by half on both sides. And then flip this right side out. Like this. And you're going to press or roll right here at the short ends on both sides of the zipper. And then once we have that really nicely pressed or rolled, we're going to top stitch right across here through both the main and lining on both sides. Once you have those top stitched, we're going to baste the main and lining gussets to each other along the sides right here. So if you'd like to pin or clip along the bottom gusset, I don't think you probably need to on the top, although you could, just to hold this in place while you baste it, you can do that. And we're going to do it on both sides. So go all the way around, and then on the other side too, just so we don't have any loose ends when we go to add this to the main panels. Okay, next we're going to quarter the gusset. So the way to do that is that we're going to align the short seams like this, and I like to clip them together, and then we'll pull it out to wherever the fabric folds. And you can either add another pin or clip, or you can add just a tiny little snip in the fabric. And you want to do this on both sides of the gusset. If you add that little tiny snip, you can very obviously see where that quarter is. And then we're going to do it on the other side as well. So you should have 1, 2, 3, 4 marked. And then we can unclip that center and line up the little snips, or if you made, did a pin or a clip, or even you can mark it with a pen, whatever you feel like. But we're going to mark, we're going to clip, I should say, those together so that we can get the opposite quarter points, because they're not actually at, logically you might think, oh, they're going to be at that little seam that we just, nope, they're not there. They're actually a little bit in a different spot. So Then mark 4 more spots here. Okay, so now you should have 4 snips, clips, marks, whatever, quarter points on both this one side of the gusset and the other side of the gusset. Okay, so we're going to start by adding the gusset to the front. And on your front, you should already have marked from the pattern your quarter points. If you have not marked them, go back and mark them. You can also find the quarter points by folding it in half to find the top and bottom quarter points, and then folding it this way to find the side quarter points. But we're going to basically line up the quarter points we made on the gusset to the quarter points we made at the front. And you can think about which way you want your zipper, if you only have one, to open or close. A store-bought zipper will open to the right, but depending on how you wear the bag, you can think about it if you want it the other way. So if you want it to open to the right, you can then lay it here so that it opens to the right. And we're going to match up that quarter point there and clip it into place. And then match up the side and the bottom. And if I didn't mention and you haven't seen, they're supposed to be right sides together. Okay, so we have a couple options from here. One, we can just keep them clipped and keep clipping. I don't really recommend that. The other 2 options are we can baste at each of these quarter points. So we can take it to the sewing machine and just do like 3 or 4 stitches forward and backward at each of the points here, or you can staple them. And if you have very hard to work with, like thicker fabrics, stapling's great. And you literally just take a stapler and staple within the seam allowance. So like at about a 1/4 inch on all 4 of the points. So I'm going to choose to baste today, and you can choose to do however you'd like. So the next thing we need to do is just go ahead and clip around the rest of the gusset. You can start by just getting these straight parts lined up really well. And then when it starts to curve right here on the bag, that's where we're going to add the snips. So you can snip. You don't want to go too far. Like don't put your scissors here and try to cut. You need a sharp pair of scissors, and you just want to go in just a little bit. And just about every 1/2 inch or so, we're going to add another little snip into the gusset, not into the bag. And what that is going to do is allow us to go around that corner, because it's a little hard to do if you don't do this. If you need to add any more snips, you can. And then clip this all into place, and you can kind of ease the bag around that corner. And then you're just going to do that on all 4 corners, and then pin or clip it all into place really well. Okay, once you've added all your clips or pins all the way around, or staples, you can add a couple extra staples if things are not holding into place. We're going to sew all the way around the gusset. Make sure you keep the gusset on top so that if you need to clip it all into the corners anymore, you have access to do that. You can flip this out and check what it looks like, and then we're going to put it back to the wrong side and attach the gusset to the back panel. Okay, so you can kind of coil the strap up so that you can pop this on top, right sides together. And again, we're going to match up those quarter points. And so exactly the same way as the front, they'll just be a little bit more bulk, right? So make sure you get your quarter points, the 4 points on the top, bottom, and sides marked first. And then pin or clip them together. And then you can baste or staple those quarter points and then go around and clip everything into place just the same way, and then sew all the way around. One last thing I do want to mention is that we need to make sure that that zipper is unzipped. It will actually maybe make it a little easier to go around too, but that's how we're going to flip the bag right side out, is through the zipper. So you get those 4 points matched up really well. And go baste them and then go all the way around again. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good. So there's only one more thing we have to, well, okay, I take that back. There's 2 things. 1, we have to bind the seams, and 2, we can add the hardware to the strap, and then we're all done. We're all done soon, very soon. Okay, so on this seam allowance on both sides, you're gonna trim it down not too much because we're using a 1/2 inch binding, and so we don't want to trim off so much that we don't go around the binding well, but we do want to like definitely get anything that's sticking out. Okay, once you have all those trimmed down, you have 2 options on how to bind the seams. So one, you can use, this is actually single fold bias tape, but double fold bias tape just has an extra seam down there. And as you can see, this is not enough. So I'm just showing it so that you can see how to do it. So what you're going to want to do is you can start at the bottom so that you can't see it as well where the seam is. And you're going to fold the short end of the tape in 1/2 inch to the wrong side. And then you can clip it onto the seam allowance. On some of these tapes, one side of here or here is going to be just a little bit skinnier. And if yours is that way, put the skinnier side on first. And then you're just going to wrap the binding around the edge of the seam here. You don't have to clip this into place first because you're going to be pulling a little bit when you go all the way around, and you'll probably end up with a slightly different amount than you clipped on. But you're going to start sewing right here where you did that little fold to the wrong side. And sew right here in the crease all the way around the bag after you have this, in place. And then when you come back to the beginning, you can just put that flat in there, because then after you've sewn it, you're going to wrap it around, and then you'll have a nice finished area right there with no raw edges peeking out. So you'll sew it around that first time in the crease, and then you'll fold all of this over. After it's sewn, and then you'll sew again to get that all into place. So when you flip it over, you're going to want to have everything nicely tucked in, and then you'll sew again to secure that into place, and your seams will be hidden. So that's the way to do it with bias binding. You can make your own bias binding, or you can buy this pre-made. The other way, which I'm going to do today because I think this black will be really fun with it, is to use fold over elastic. This is also called FOE, and it has kind of a dull side and a shiny side. You can choose whatever side you want up for your bag. And this one is as simple as just wrapping it around your seam allowance. And you're going to stretch it just a little bit. So you don't want it like loose. You want it just slightly stretched around the seam. And the same thing with this one. You don't really need to pin it on in place first. You can kind of just do this as you're going so that you know you don't have to like cut it in a spot. But basically, you're going to go all the way around like this. And then when you come back to the start point, you can trim it off so it's about an inch longer than where you started, and then fold it and then sandwich that around your seam. And then you'll be done. So you're just sewing through both sides all at once when you do this one. And sew all the way around on both sides with either the bias binding or the FOE, whatever you choose. Okay, and then we're just going to add the hardware to the bag, which is super simple. If you used webbing for your strap, make sure that you have melted the end so that it doesn't fray. And then we're just going to need one tri-glide and one swivel clasp. So you're going to, if you have your bag on this side, you want to make sure that the strap is not twisted. And then you have this being the top, which is the same as the top there. And we're going to grab the tri-glide and feed the strap through the top part of the tri-glide. And then you're going to go in to the other side of the tri-glide through that middle bar. So it should look like this so far. Now you'll feed your swivel clasp on right side up, like this. And then you'll take the end of your strap. So you want this to be loose still so that you can still work in here. You'll take the end of your strap and put it through the bottom part because we want the strap to end up inside this loop over here. This part can be a little difficult depending on how thick your strap is and how big your tri-glide is. So if you have a hard time shoving it through there, just do your best. So now it should look like this with this part through this loop over here, and your swivel clasp should be over here on this side toward the outer wall. We don't want that inside here. We want it out here. And then the last step is that you need to put the strap back into the top part of the tri-glide. So you can see that there's two strap, pieces on the bottom and one on the top. So we want to go back through that top area. Okay, your strap should now look like this. And you can pull all of that through and make sure that everything, you don't want to pull on this little strap, just everything else you can pull on, and then you can adjust it later just to make sure that you've done it right. So ideally, you have this coming out Nothing is twisted. And then at the bottom, you have your swivel clasp. And that is where you're going to connect it to either this side or the side of the bag, depending on how you end up wanting to wear it. So to secure this bottom part right here, it depends on what type of strap you're using. So if you're using vinyl like me, all you need to do is just fold it about 3/4 inch right here. And then you can either put a rivet through it, or you can stitch a square with an X through it just to secure that into place. If you're using something that frays on the end, you just want to do it twice. So just do it twice, and you can pull this out just a little bit longer in order to have room to get in there. And then same with webbing, you're going to want to do it twice. And then you can either do a rivet, or if you're using webbing, go ahead and do the square with the X. And then you're all done. So let's go get that one last step finished. Did you finish your bag? Did you do it all in one day? I didn't. I did mine in 2 days, but I love how it turned out with all the nice pockets on both sides. And I like to wear it this way. You'll have to decide which way you like to wear it best, but this way is really nice because you can just slip your pocket or your phone in and out of the pocket really easily. And it's super comfortable. So let me know if you finished your bag, if you have any questions. Again, you can find the pattern link in the description below, and be sure to like and follow us for more great patterns and tutorials.